Hi folks, welcome to Parliament Hill. It's August 11th, 2016, and earlier this summer I uploaded a video about the need for a national autism strategy. Today, what I'd like to do is talk about autism awareness and the need for a little bit more than just considering autism awareness as an end in itself, but the need for some consideration of autism awareness as being a means to an end. Meaning that there's a need to take a further step to go a little bit beyond just raising awareness and to take some meaningful action to help improve the lives of Canadians with autism. A number of charities across Canada have engaged in some campaigns to raise awareness. And I've often asked them, why don't they do a little more in terms of not just describing what the disorder is, but also describe what are the public policy gaps and what are the things that children diagnosed with autism need in order to access treatment or the supports later on in their lives. And the response I got is that these charities can't really engage in anything beyond what is considered charitable work, or they risk losing, if they do too much political lobbying, their charitable status from the Canada Revenue Agency. That, of course, would make it impossible for them to issue tax receipts and would affect their financing and ultimately jeopardize their existence. So that's understandable. What is unfortunate, though, is that these charities that are effectively muted by the government often are considered to be the voice of our community, which obviously they can't be. So it's up to the non-charitable type of organization, the non-profits, and the individuals and advocates like us to speak up to government officials about what's needed. Now, a couple of years ago, the United Nations General Assembly declared April 2nd of every year, starting in 2008, as being World Autism Awareness Day. And shortly afterwards, Senator Jim Munson had a bill passed by the Canadian Parliament which similarly declared April 2nd every year to be World Autism Awareness Day in Canada. That day provides an opportunity for politicians in the Senate and the House of Commons to rise and give speeches about autism. And there's usually a rally here on Parliament Hill for autism awareness. An analysis of these speeches is actually very interesting because it contrasts two different versions or views of what autism awareness can really be all about. On the one hand, some people seem to consider autism awareness as being an end in itself, whereas other people view autism awareness as being a means to an end, a sort of a step to take towards making government programs that help improve the lives of people with autism. So just to give you some illustrations and some examples. This year, Senator Jim Munson got up in the Senate and he spoke about Autism Awareness Day, and he mentioned that the prevalence rate was high. And he gave us an example of a serious crisis problem, the fact that the Auditor General of Ontario issued a report pointing out that 16,000 people with autism in Ontario were on wait lists for autism services. He then made reference to the Senate Standing Committee on Social Affairs report from 2007 called Pay Now or Pay Later, which studied the question of funding for autism treatment. And it concluded by recommending the adoption, through collaboration between the federal government and the provinces, of a national autism strategy. So he referred to that strategy and he concluded by saying that he will not rest until such a national autism strategy is adopted. That kind of a speech really gave hope. In contrast, in the House of Commons, there was also a speech by an MP, a Conservative MP from Alberta by the name of Mike Lake. And Mike Lake has a son with autism, and on every Autism Awareness Day, Mike Lake typically gets up in the House of Commons and makes a short speech about his son and how he loves his son, and how scoring goals and statistics for assists isn't the measure by which to, appreciate his son's humanity and beingness. Instead, it's always a question about his son and accepting and respecting and And that's wonderful, except that love is not the problem, and love alone is not the solution. His speeches never seem to make any reference to the public policy gaps, what can be done, what should be done, what's he doing, or what are the next steps for our community. It's always just about his son, and he gets a warm round of applause and lots of backslapping. Now, in contrast, you know, a lot of people are surprised that there isn't much more in his speeches about public policy, but this really shouldn't come as a surprise, because Mike Lake issued in 2008 a media statement about why he voted against Bill C-304. Bill C-304 was a private member's bill from Sean Murphy, a Liberal opposition MP at the time, and the bill had two parts. One required the Federal Minister of Health to meet with the provincial counterparts and develop a national autism strategy and present it to the House. And the second part dealt with a legislative amendment to a federal statute to ensure that autism treatment would be available under Medicare from coast to coast across this country. And as currently we know, many provinces don't cover autism treatment under Medicare. Some provinces like Ontario do, but it's under a different ministry with loads of waiting lists, loads of lack of resources, and, you know, forcing people to go to the private sector and spend a fortune. In our family's case, it was $40,000 in the first 11 months alone, while we waited 2 years to get some assistance, and then we were cut off. So that's what happens when there's a lack of Medicare coverage for autism treatment, and that bill tried to address it. Mike Lake's media statement didn't make any reference at all to the National Autism Strategy component, and instead just focused on the legislative amendment to the Canada Health Act that was proposed, and simply criticized it, voted against it at second reading, killed the bill. The Tories and the Bloc Québécois voted against it, and they didn't send it to the committee stage for clause-by-clause analysis and consideration of alternatives if there were problems, what else could be done, or any alternative recommendations for amendments to the House. Instead, it was just a question of killing the bill. Now, you can find his statement, which basically summarizes his position that it's all a question of jurisdiction and so on, which is available on his website, but an annotated version of his letter, which on a paragraph-by-paragraph basis exposes the fallacies in the argumentation and provides the counter-arguments, is available on the website of Families for Early Autism Treatment of BC. That's featbc.org. If you do a Google search on Mike Lake votes against Bill C-304 or Mike Lake votes against autism bill, it'll come up. And then there was this rally on Parliament Hill this year, and there were two teens who spoke, followed by a couple of politicians. And one of the problems, of course, with these autism awareness rallies is that parents in the community who attend these things, we already know about autism. What we need is to bring other people in, and on Parliament Hill, of course, other politicians in the media. There wasn't that much of that. Most of the people I saw in the crowd were primarily from the community who already knew about autism. Now, the first two speakers were a young girl and a young man, and they were remarkably eloquent, remarkably good speakers. No problem articulating their words, and they basically said that they enjoyed being a little different, and they just wished that their peers in school and so on would stop bullying them and be a little bit more supportive and have greater confidence in them. And I thought, you know, having these people up there to demonstrate what autism is was a little bit of a misrepresentation. If some person came into the audience who didn't know what autism was, he'd think that autism was just a little quirkiness. I mean, these kids were either so high functioning or they had Asperger's syndrome, which is certainly nothing related to the classical autism of the severe variation that my son suffers from. It's completely nonverbal and wouldn't even be able to make a speech, let alone a very good one. And then a couple of politicians spoke, one Liberal, and one statement was read from an NDP member that were entirely forgettable. And then Mike Lake spoke. And Mike Lake talked about his son, and how much he loves his son, and how his son's great. And then he also talked about how his daughter loves her brother. but not one word in there about the public policy gaps, what needs to be done, no mention of a national autism strategy, no mention of what he's doing to help the community, no mention of next steps, nothing. And then, finally, Senator Munson spoke. And I often wish Trudeau had appointed Senator Munson to be the National Health Minister, because that might help. But Senator Munson basically got up and said that it's up to us parents to outline for politicians what are the concerns, the problems, what needs to be done. And presumably when he referred to parents, he also included parents that get elected to legislatures. And then he made the point that the last government had in fact developed a Ready, Willing, and Able program to help people with disabilities get employment. And they also implemented a registered disability savings plan. But he pointed out that those are the foundations of social infrastructure that we need to build upon in order to achieve ultimately the goal of ensuring that every kid gets diagnosed in a timely fashion, and if they've got autism, that they can get autism treatment in a timely fashion under Medicare from coast to coast. And then he talked about the fact that we need a national autism strategy, and he would not rest until we had one. And so Senator Munson's clearly our champion for our cause on the Hill, and I wish the other politicians would learn more from him about what can be done, what needs to be done. Now, what happened since then is a very interesting development on the political front. The Federal Liberal Party had a policy convention in May in Winnipeg, and at that convention they considered a number of policy resolutions, including one about access to treatment under Medicare from coast to coast, to be negotiated in a collaboration between the Federal Minister of Health and the provincial counterparts with funding from the federal government. Now that resolution was debated, and it was voted on, and it passed, and it was adopted by the Federal Liberal Party. So presumably this is now part of their policy book. I didn't see any mention of it, of autism at all in the health minister's mandate letter after the last election in October of 2015. But hopefully a new health accord will be negotiated, and that's an accord where, for example, in 2004, for 10 years, the federal government gave money to the provinces, billions and billions, in exchange for specific services, medical services, at certain national standards. So hopefully we'll see federal Liberals adopt and implement their policy that they voted on and adopted at this convention, and hopefully we can move from not just having autism awareness as an end in itself, but use it as a means towards another end, which is ultimately to help improve the lives of Canadians with autism. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.